listener! Was it a good idea to employ me, Claptrap, a lovable robot with an admittedly shrill voice, to tell you about the next great looter shooter? Borderlands 4? Of course not! But you are listening, and that's the sick truth of marketing. Behold! Marketing hypnosis! Borderlands 4! Borderlands 4! Borderlands 4! Buy it! Buy it! Succumb to the marketing!
Rated M for mature.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
Hi, we're sisters Amy and Nancy Harrington, the founders of the Passionistas Project, an inclusive sisterhood where women come to find support, purpose, and empowerment. On each episode, we share stories of passion-driven women who are breaking barriers and redefining success. Today, we're talking with Stephanie McAuliffe, a boundary strategist and international best-selling author who empowers leaders to own their truth without apology. She fuses 27 years of Wall Street experience with transformational energy healing to help clients clear the past and create a powerful future. So we're so excited to talk to Stephanie today. How are you doing? We're glad you're here.
I'm awesome, and I'm honored to be here with you both.
Excellent. So what are you most passionate about?
Boundaries and healing. And very few of us grew up with boundaries. We grew up with rules that were disguised as boundaries that actually were used to control us rather than empower us. So I am all about shedding the rules of the past and healing our stories and standing in our power.
So let's go back to your childhood. Boundaries or lack of boundaries. Tell us where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
I grew up in the suburbs of Boston in a family that knew multi-generational functional alcoholism and silencing and trauma and abuse and some mental illness. If you're familiar with the adverse childhood experiences, I can count 7 of 10. And it's very interesting because it's a middle-class household and had all the trappings of what I call the middle class. So clothes on my back, food in my belly, a roof over my head, a home that looked nice. And yet there's something that I call the separation of church and state. And it's as if what's within the 4 walls of our home is church. And there's rules and there's an upstanding and a way we need to be. And yet what's projected outside, which I call state, is something very different. And so it can really cause us to question, like, what is my truth? What happens if someone finds out what's really happening in our household? And it puts you into all of fight, flight, and freeze, which is exactly what I experienced. And there was a lot of silencing. We don't talk about these things. We don't air our dirty laundry. A lot of the phrases that a lot of us grew up with. And I didn't realize it wasn't normal until I moved out and got into my career.
Yeah. So how did you get out? What were the steps? What did you go to college? Do you take the normal route that kids take?
I did. I went to college and then fell in love, moved to New Jersey, and soon after started working on Wall Street. I was in systems and then project and program management. And I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. I did the career thing. My last gig was an $85 million 4-year global transformation program for a very large insurance company. And when we completed that, I was looking around and saying, is this it? It wasn't as satisfying as we're taught that it's supposed to be. And they were beginning layoffs, so I took a package. I was a senior director at that point. And then all of a sudden sat with this space of what do I do with my life now? Because a year earlier, my marriage had ended. And I started going deeper into my own healing and started really looking at where did I come from and what did I really grow up around? And I started to see the threads of the spider web. And then as I wrote my first book in 2017, I really began to see the dysfunction. Because it's easy to, I'd gone to Al-Anon for years, and 12-step is great if you've, grown up around alcoholism and even dysfunction. And I connected with a lot of other people's stories, but then I started looking at mine, and it was rather shocking to realize, whereas when I was on Wall Street, I thought I had the world by the you know what, I really realized how little I had and how much I was trying to control things out of my own fear. There were a lot of layers to unwind and unravel and to look at the gaslighting and the dysfunction and the toxic codependency and the lack of boundaries and the lack of even, how do you not stand up for your daughter who's been sexually abused, who's 6 years old? Like really questioning how effed up certain things were.
Yeah.
So once you started to really unpack all those things, how did that start to impact your life?
It opened things up, and it's really interesting. I think we all have moments that are catalysts for us. And in 2017, I was still living in New Jersey. It was a joint day of meetings between AA and Al-Anon called GelCon. And I had never been to an AA meeting, even though I had married two alcoholics and I was surrounded by them all my life. So I went to an AA meeting, and a man came in and he told the story of how his father had forced him to do heroin together when he was a teenager, which is horrible. No one should ever do that. But then I led an ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics meeting, and the man came in and told the exact same story. And it was like this light bulb went off of, I saw how stuck people were in their stories. And I had already started to explore energy healing. And that was when I really, instead of experiencing it, I went into some deep training because I said, well, maybe I can start healing myself. And then I did all the different levels. I'm a Holy Fire 3 Karuna Reiki master. I've received my own symbols. I've studied with world-renowned healers. And I like to say energy work completed the sentence. And it's meant to be a metaphor because 12-step and therapy are great, but sometimes through that we put ourselves in a box. That man in that meeting was in his box. I had been in a box, and the box gives us safety. It gives us our labels and our walls and our definition where we can express our traumas and our stories and share with like-minded people. And then there's a point of, aren't you tired of telling that story?
Yeah. So it seems like a huge leap to go from financial systems and Wall Street to energy healing. So what's the thread there that connects the two of those places for you?
There's a couple of threads. I have done a lot of work with my younger self as well as past life work. And one of my memories from, I was probably about 18 months old, I was in my backyard and I could see the blades of grass and how they were connected. And being in systems has always been, how do the pieces of the puzzle fit together? And that's even the work that I do with clients now. It's they'll come to me with something and we'll start to explore the thread back to see how the pieces fit together and then work to clear the energy. So I call it our spider web, but it's the pieces of the puzzle and how they fit together that create the story that we're living.
Was there a specific moment that you were working on Wall Street that you decided, okay, this is it. I'm done. I need to go a different way?
Yeah, when I was looking for my next gig, and I knew riffs were coming, and I said, well, what am I going to do? A $100 million project now? I had just spent 4+ years grinding, because when you're managing a large program, you're really rarely off. And I just said, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. And I did a short consulting engagement, really enjoyed it, created what would have been a program management office designed for them. The company wasn't ready. And I went to a retreat north of Toronto in the middle of July. And one of the presenters was a woman who had left corporate and was standing on stage. She was now a coach. And I remember sitting in the back of the room and I was bawling, because it was like that weekend I gave myself permission to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what's next. And I am going to allow myself to be in that liminal space, because I've done it for 27 years. I don't need to keep repeating something that I loved for a while. That it's time to say, you know what, our relationship, it's time for it to come to an end.
So, what did you have to unlearn about success and productivity, or even your own identity, in order to step away from all that and build a new life on your terms?
One of the first books that I read, well, not first, but one of the really impactful books was The Fear Project, which is a great book. And I don't even remember, 10, 12 years ago, I read it. And the author talks a lot about all the different ways that fear impacts us and how fear is used to control us. And I started to see how much I had led my life by the fearful. And it goes back to that separation of church and state of, what if somebody finds out how I really feel? What if somebody really finds out what I'm thinking? What if somebody really finds out where I came from or what happened in my life and the abuses? And so it was a lot of unwinding and unlearning. And when I first left Wall Street, I truly did not know what to do with myself. And I sat on my couch for a couple of months. And I gardened and I went to workshops, and this was so it was 2016, and there were a lot of Hay House events, full day long. I'd go to Philly for the day and see different people. And that's where I connected with Colette Baron-Reed, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and a number of other practitioners. Some I loved, some I didn't. Those two I love. And I gave myself the opportunity and the permission to play and explore, which when I was so driven in my career, my to-do list drove my day to day. I didn't really have time to be. I was always doing. So it's been a slow procession or progression of letting go of doing and allowing myself to be and explore and not feel like my answers have to be perfect out of the gate.
Yeah.
So it's a big leap from doing that for yourself and helping other people do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the inspiration to you to start coaching, and what were some of the challenges that you faced in making that shift?
So I first started working with families of alcoholics, because I thought that was what I was going to do. That was my first book, The Message in the Bottle. And I did work with some women who were still married to alcoholics who'd grown up around alcoholism. And it was almost like the end of Wall Street. It was good. I was very good at it, and I knew there was more. So that was when I really got into the energy healing because, first of all, there's a lot of families of alcoholics who just want to get their loved one to stop drinking and then they think everything's going to be perfect. Well, sometimes we have just as much recovery that we need to do as they do. And it was not about convincing anyone. And I allowed myself to play, and I did oracle card readings for a while with people. I still have an amazing abundance 6-card reading that I do every now and then that goes really deep, that can inform your path for upwards of 6 months, prosperity and abundance. And then more energy healing. And then I traveled for 8 months in 2019 and then moved to Provo, Utah, right before the pandemic started. And I had plans to travel and speak around the world, and the universe had other plans for us. And then I went through and healed breast cancer. And so there was a lot of, it was almost as if the universe was slowing me down to connect me with what it is that I've really been meant to do. And as I moved through healing breast cancer and moved beyond family members telling me, get out of your artsy-fartsy lifestyle and you don't know what you're doing, I started to get into the boundaries work. And even more so when I moved to Texas to care for my father in his last 9 months of his life. And now with the passing of my mother, it continues to deepen this work. And it's really profound because boundaries are sexy. Boundaries are a superpower. And people are so afraid of them because we're terrified of being being abandoned or rejected. And yet when we don't set a boundary, we're actually abandoning and rejecting ourselves.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about being a boundary strategist. What exactly does that mean, and what's your approach?
So we look at our formative years always, because that informs a lot of, and did you even have boundaries? What were the rules? What were the dynamics? Did you grow up in an authoritarian household? Was there the bypassing of emotions and stories? So, and the separation of, or the dynamic of church and state are 3 of the big patterns that many of us grow up with. And then also looking at our resentments. So in a way, it's kind of bringing everything up to the surface. And it's not therapy. It's when we know what it is that's there that's still triggering us, then we get to choose how we want to move through it. So looking at, did you grow up with a parent with mental illness? Did you grow up around alcoholism? There are many energies that we take on either through past DNA, generational trauma, the people that we're growing up around. So we're looking at kind of the alchemy of all of these pieces. And then the energy healing part of this is some of it is this life, some of it is past life. We'll have blocks within our body that are kind of like, if you think of something you haven't been able to express, it's almost like blowing a bubble, except you're swallowing the bubble. And when the bubble pops, all that energy sticks to your inside. That's why so many people have stomach issues. We carry anger and frustration in our liver and our kidneys. That's why we can literally be pissed off. So it's looking at how all of these pieces fit together and clearing the energies. Sometimes there's energetic attachments as well. There's cords to clear. So the initial part of the exploration is really to identify what it is that this person and their person's higher self wants to clear, to free them to move forward cleanly and clearly.
I think it's important. I don't think people understand necessarily this, but can you explain the difference between big T trauma and little T trauma?
Yes.
And why it's important to know that distinction?
Yeah. So, for example, big T trauma is my stepbrother sexually abused me for 4 years. The small T trauma is that people within the house knew it and did nothing to protect me, and we didn't talk about it. And so the small T trauma is like death by 1,000 paper cuts because they know, you're not being protected, you're not being taken care of. And in many instances, at least from my own personal experience, I disassociated from myself because the pain was so great. Like, how do you not protect a child? Especially when their abuser is living in the same house. So the big T trauma is the act, and the small T trauma is the not giving the space to heal and bypassing what's really going on. Now, in some cases, there are generations before us who were never taught how to process their emotions. There are many generations in my family who have experienced abuse as well and were not protected. And it doesn't mean that we can't break the cycle to choose something different for our children or somebody in our care or someone that we love, to say that's not okay. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that now. There's actually, I saw it on Instagram, but it's also on TikTok. There are adults who are sitting in their car or in their home with their child, and they're starting a phrase of children should be seen. And then they let their child answer it. And the way these kids are being raised, they're breaking the cycle, which is amazing. There's a whole generation of children who are not being taught in the way that many of us were. And yet there's many of us of certain generations who still have a lot to heal.
Yeah. Yeah, we were definitely the sweep it under the rug generation. Like, don't talk about that. No one needs to know that. Our dad died, and at the funeral, his mental health came up. And his family, his immediate family, his 5 children were the only people who knew what my sister was talking about. Everyone else, not a clue. We didn't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Don't upset dad. Don't talk about it. It's amazing.
Well, and there's also this thing of your status in society is based on how the family is seen.
Yeah.
And that's where that fear of what if somebody finds out what's really happening? What if someone finds out how this really is? So, and in certain societies or certain places around the country. So when I was first interviewing people for my second book, The Impact of Silence, a good friend of mine who's African American said in the South, families had to keep secrets because that was how you protected the family. So it wasn't about somebody finding out what was happening. It was because there was so much tension in the racial tension in the South. You didn't want anyone to know your business. So there's different dynamics with different cultures.
Yeah. And let's talk about women specifically. Is there a pattern of belief that you see come up over and over with high performing women or conscious leaders that you work with?
Yes, because many of us are trying to strive and prove that we are good enough.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers that come with that, but really it is proving that we are worthy to someone who showed us, who projected their own. I'm not even going to say showed us that we weren't. There are many who project their own unworthiness, and our brain waves are so wide open up through the age of 8 that we absorb the energy of the people we're growing up around. So if you grew up with a mother or a father who did not feel worthy, who felt insecure, more often than not, you took that on through no fault of your own. And that's another reason why I focus on energy healing. Because there's things that these invisible things we're fighting that we don't understand where they came from. Like, why do I feel like this? Why is it never enough? It may be through no fault of your own because you grew up in a dynamic that couldn't necessarily have supported you in the way that you would have liked because you were being raised by people who were living out their own life.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So many things going through my head right now about like, oh yeah, dad,
I
dad.
love
It's
this work.
interesting to grow. We grew up in a household where our mom was actually the complete opposite of our dad, very nurturing and loving and very like lots of stability, but she allowed his behavior to permeate the house. So,
And
but
that's a lack of boundaries.
yeah, so there's totally a lack of boundary. There were rules for sure, but there
Mhm.
was, you know, there weren't really boundaries. It's fascinating. I
Yeah.
never looked at it from that
No,
perspective.
and I've talked with many people and they say, what's a boundary? It's, a moat around a fence or I mean a moat around a castle or a fence around a property. But there's physical, there's mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual boundaries. And, who we do and don't let into our life and how much, frankly, I think everybody needs to be taken off of a pedestal because you may have more knowledge than me in a certain area. It doesn't put you above me, it doesn't put you below me. So there's a lot of people from the spiritual perspective who have gurus. And like, I won't do anything without my guru telling me what to do. It's like, why are you giving so much of your power away? So as we create stronger boundaries for ourselves, it's like our strength emanates from the inside out. And in many ways, we don't need boundaries anymore.
Yeah, fascinating.
Mm.
So when someone comes to work with you, what's step number one?
Step number one is looking at what are you most frustrated with right now? What is this thing that like and most people that come to me have already done a lot of work. They may have been to therapy and or 12 step. They've read books. They're at a point of I can't stand this anymore. So we dive into what can't you stand? What is it that you haven't been able to move beyond? I had a client a number of years ago who was still challenged with her mother. And this is a woman who is a trained hypnotist. So she does her own energy work. And this is where we need to classify the levels of energy work that are done because it's just like doctors. You're not going to go to a dermatologist for heart surgery. But anyway, this client, in a couple of sessions, in the last one that we did, I saw her as a fetus in her mother's womb, with her feet pointing to her mother's heart and all this black tar energy coming from her mother's heart down into her feet. And we cleared that. Her mother had a lot of hate. She had a lot of resentment. There's a lot of things we take on in the womb. And she said, over the years, there's been little things that have come up. She said, I thought I was going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. And we cleared it. So part of it is she was very willing to let go of it. If you don't want to let go of a story, doesn't matter how powerful or the gifts anybody has. It goes back to that box that we create for ourselves. And so we look at what's here, what's very present for you, and then we start to work the spider web out.
So you've mentioned your books, the first one, Message in the Bottle, and your new book, The Impact of Silence. So tell us a little bit about the two books and what you hope readers get from them.
The Message in the Bottle, Finding Hope and Peace Amidst the Chaos of Living with an Alcoholic, is definitely edgier and a little rawer than the second book. It reflects where I was when I wrote it in the winter of 2017. So 8 years ago. And it is a self-help memoir. There's a lot of introspective questions in it to help the reader explore their own journey with growing up or living around alcoholism. And it can be functional alcoholism. I had people in my life who went to work, but then they came home and the drink started. And we think of that as normal. And it's very normalized. The second book, The Impact of Silence, Reclaim the Sovereignty of Your Soul, has actually been published twice. It was initially published a little over 3 years ago. And it's a further into my journey, and was written while I was initially written while I was undergoing treatment for breast cancer and working with my naturopath and my allopathic doctors. And then I moved here to Texas to care for my dad. And after he passed, I was like, all right, universe, what do you want me to do? And the book wanted to be rewritten. It wanted a new voice. So it's probably about 60% different. But each chapter has whereas the first book has a lot of a lot of questions at the end of each chapter. The latest version of The Impact of Silence has one invitation at the end of the chapter, and they're processes that I've created. Everything that I offer, I've done for myself. And you can open up the book like an oracle. Each section is meant to be its own little oracle section. So you could open up the paperback and, oh, that's what I meant to read right now. So that's the difference in the second edition of it. It's much more concise. And I've been given the all clear. So it rounded out the ending of the book more. And again, it's taking the reader deeper into their own journey so that they can explore some of what we've talked about, their spiderweb, their family history. I've taken Ho'oponopono to a whole new level. And I talk about the hike that I did in Jemez Springs, New Mexico, and healing on an 11-mile hike. And so it's really taking a person deeper into their journey, because none of us are meant to be holding on to these things. And sometimes we just don't know where to go.
What's the most powerful thing you've learned about yourself working with your clients?
There's two things that come to mind. Don't take it personally, and it's not about me. And like I said, it doesn't matter the gifts. If someone does not want to let go of a story, that's their journey. That is their free will. So I used to take it very personally of like, but we've done all this work and you still feel stuck. And it was like my responsibility, which goes back to my mother's mental illness, which I took that on as my responsibility. So in working with clients, it's also helped me to heal some things from my earlier years. And don't take it personally. There's actually a great book entitled The Impersonal Life, little blue paperback book, that 95% of what people do has absolutely nothing to do with you. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. It doesn't mean it wasn't really crappy. I'm not going to swear. I was going to, but I'll keep this clean. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt you. And it doesn't mean it was intended towards you. So don't take it personally I think of sometimes of going to a therapist and telling them what I wanted to say so I could hear what I wanted to hear. Well, if you hire a coach or a healer for the same thing, yeah, it's our free will.
Yeah. Where do you see your work evolving in the next few years?
Healing from the stage. And I've already started. So I have a master class, The Conundrum of Boundaries. The next one is being taught on September 4th, and I'm going to start offering it monthly. And in it, we do a guided visualization with energy healing. So healing from the stage isn't necessarily standing on a literal stage, but really anytime I'm teaching a workshop or a master class, there is energy healing that comes with it. So there's energy healing in all that I do and going deeper into that, because I think that's what many of us need the most and crave the most.
Yeah. Do you think you have another book in you?
Oh, it's the first draft is almost done. And it's going deeper into the boundaries work. And I even think about the first book, it was marginally about boundaries. And the second one, it's very interesting because when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I took 6 months off from writing it. And probably about 90% of what I wrote did not end up in the first edition. And yet I still have all of that material. And so it's going much deeper into the boundaries work. And because I think people don't understand how much we've given away through our lack of boundaries. And part of it too, I think, is if you weren't taught, sometimes there is the expectation, like you're supposed to know what a boundary is. What? But if you weren't taught, so give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Because most of us don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people get in touch with you if they'd like more information?
The best way is my website, which is wayofthediamondwarrior.com. I have some meditations that are on there that folks can sign up for to download. There's information about my classes and podcasts and info about my books, and my blog. So there's a lot of, that's the best way. And then they can connect to the socials as well if they want to.
What's the question we're not asking about setting boundaries?
Why does it matter?
Why does it matter?
And the answer?
Because we are all sovereign beings and we are meant to live in our own truth and not the truth or the rules of someone else. And as long as we're living in someone else's truth or their rules, we're not in our own sovereignty.
So one last two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
What's your dream for yourself and what's your dream for women?
So I'm going to start with my dream for women is for us all to be at peace. And that's actually the signature on all of my emails is peace. It's coming to a place of internal peace that no matter what is happening in the world around us, we don't get pulled into the drama of it. It doesn't mean that we don't see it. It doesn't mean that we don't do something about it. And yet, when we're being pulled into someone else's drama, we're being pulled into their story. So, for all of us to be at peace and to support each other in bringing all of our gifts to the world. And for me, it's interesting because in the last year, I've lost both of my parents. And I'm in this liminal space again, kind of like how I was after I left Wall Street. And it's okay, what's the next chapter? And I think it is really part of it is being the go-to expert about boundaries and what they mean for healing trauma and for us to stand in our power. And I'm walking my talk. So it's continuing to expand this message so that people know that no can be a one-word answer. Yes, we can stand in our power. No, we don't have to put up with toxic codependency. And yes, boundaries can be really sexy.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast. As real-life sisters, best friends, and business partners, we know how rare it is to have a built-in support system. But we also know that so many women, activists, solopreneurs, and purpose-driven people are out there doing it alone and wishing they had a community like ours. That's exactly why we created the Passionistas Project Sisterhood, a space where support, trust, and authenticity come first. When you join, you become part of our extended family. You'll get the tools you need to grow your business, develop personally, and create real social impact. You'll also learn from our Power Passionistas, leaders, changemakers, and experts who share their wisdom on everything from letting go of perfectionism to embracing community and stepping fully into your purpose. Whether it's through online meetups, chat spaces, Passionistas TV and the Passionistas Podcast Network, or our exclusive workshop series, you'll be surrounded by like-minded women and gender non-conforming folks who are just as passionate as you are about living with purpose and making a difference. Visit thepassionistasproject.com to join our free membership and become part of this growing global sisterhood of passionate changemakers. We'll be back next time with another inspiring passionista who's breaking down the barriers and defining success on her own terms. Until then, stay passionate.